157-337. We are running north and south. Then, silence. No distress call. No crash site. Just a cryptic final message followed by an absence that would mystify the world for 88 years. That fleeting transmission on July 2, 1937, marked the last time anyone heard from Amelia Earhart. She had been flying over the vast Pacific Ocean, nearing her destination, Howland Island, a tiny dot of land barely a mile and a half long. But she never arrived. She never called again. Panic swept across the globe. Just hours after that final message, it was clear something had gone terribly wrong. President Franklin D. Roosevelt quickly approved what would become the most expensive and wide-ranging search in aviation history at the time. The U.S. Navy and Coast Guard mobilized an armada. The USS Lexington, a colossal aircraft carrier, was dispatched alongside destroyers and search planes. In total, 9 ships and 66 aircraft combed more than 250,000 square miles of open ocean. They searched for anything: a floating seat cushion, a scrap of metal, an oil slick. But the Pacific remained quiet. It was as if Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan had vanished into thin air. On land, radio operators obsessed over her final transmissions, replaying them repeatedly in hopes of uncovering a hidden clue. Analysts debated fuel ranges, wind patterns, and potential navigational errors. Did they overshoot the island? Had Noonan miscalculated their position using celestial navigation? No answers came, only more questions. The world, which had followed Earhart's every stop on her journey, was stunned. She had been cheered on as a symbol of courage and progress. Her sudden disappearance didn't just seem tragic, it felt impossible. Amelia Earhart wasn't just a pilot, she was a national icon and a global inspiration. At the height of her fame, she embodied hope, exploration, and the future. Losing her was more than a personal loss, it shook the very idea of modern aviation and female empowerment. As weeks turned into months, and months into decades, the world refused to let her go. The question remained, where was Amelia Earhart? And why couldn't anyone find her? In the vacuum of facts, speculation poured in. When Earhart and Noonan disappeared that summer of 1937, the world lost more than 2 people, it lost certainty. Without answers, theories sprang up like waves crashing on a vacant beach. Some were rooted in scientific analysis and historical investigation. Others veered into the sensational. But all tried to resolve the same haunting question: what really happened to Amelia Earhart? One of the earliest and most enduring explanations was the crash and sink theory. According to this view, Earhart's Lockheed Electra simply ran out of fuel while searching for Howland Island and went down into the sea. There was no conspiracy, just a tragic combination of low fuel, poor visibility, and impossible odds. Her final confirmed position placed her near the island, and her last transmission referenced dwindling fuel. It was easy to imagine the Pacific swallowing the aircraft whole, an abyss of deep, unmapped waters. For decades, this theory directed search efforts. The U.S. Navy and later private researchers concentrated their sonar scans and deep-sea dives near Howland. Millions of dollars were spent, and dozens of expeditions launched. But not a single definitive piece of the Electra was ever found. The ocean kept it secret. That was, until the Nicky-Moreau theory emerged, an alternate explanation that quickly became one of the most compelling narratives in the search for Amelia. Nicky-Moreau, once known as Gardner Island, lies roughly 400 miles southeast of Howland. It's a remote coral atoll, flat, ringed by reef, and surrounded by open sea. In 1940, just 3 years after Earhart's disappearance, a British colonial officer named Gerald Gallagher reported a curious discovery on the island: 13 human bones, including a skull and femur, along with scattered artifacts, a woman's shoe, a sextant box, a small cosmetic jar, and part of a man's shoe. Gallagher had the remains sent to Fiji, where a British doctor concluded they belonged to a short, stocky man. And so, the case was quietly closed. But the story didn't end there. In the late 1990s, forensic anthropologists re-examined the original measurements using modern methods. Their conclusion stunned researchers. The bones likely belonged to a tall, white woman of European descent, strikingly similar to Amelia Earhart. The problem? The bones themselves had vanished, lost, misplaced, or destroyed. Only the original notes remained, leaving experts to argue over conflicting interpretations. Despite the loss of the bones, the clues kept accumulating. The International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, TIRE, conducted expeditions to Niquimero and found even more intriguing items: fragments of 1930s-era cosmetic compacts, aluminum believed to match the time period, and a jar of freckle cream. Earhart was known to use such a product. Most astonishing was a piece of thick plexiglass, shaped like a window panel from a Lockheed Electra. But perhaps the most chilling detail of all was ecological. Niquimero is home to giant coconut crabs, massive scavengers that can grow over 3 feet across and are known to drag and consume remains. Some researchers theorize that if Earhart did perish on the island, these crabs may have scattered her bones, explaining why only partial remains were ever discovered. And so, the mystery endures, suspended between evidence and speculation, caught in the space between history and myth. Amelia Earhart, even in absence, continues to inspire and perplex. The search for answers goes on. Here is the revised and restructured version of your provided content, broken into engaging and well-organized paragraphs. While some theories clung tightly to the known facts of Amelia Earhart's disappearance, others ventured into murkier waters, fueled by intrigue and whispers of espionage. One of the most provocative ideas? That Amelia Earhart was not just a record-breaking pilot, but a spy. According to this theory, her globe-circling flight in 1937 was actually a covert reconnaissance mission, secretly sanctioned by the U.S. government to gather intelligence on Japanese military activity in the Pacific. The timing wasn't coincidental. Tensions with Japan were mounting, and the Pacific was fast becoming a strategic hotspot in the looming shadow of global conflict. Proponents of this theory point to the aircraft itself, the fuel-laden Lockheed Electra, modified for extended range and equipped with advanced radio systems. It could, they suggest, have been repurposed for surveillance. Further fueling speculation were reports that, just months before the flight, Amelia met privately with Bernard Baruch, a key advisor to President Roosevelt, and General Oscar Westover, Chief of the Army Air Corps. What they discussed remains unknown, but the secrecy raised eyebrows. The theory continues with a bold claim: Earhart may have deliberately altered her course to fly over Japanese-held Marshall Islands, rather than toward Howland Island. In this version of events, she didn't crash into the ocean at all. Instead, she was forced to land on Mealy Atoll and was captured by Japanese forces. Supporting this are persistent local reports from Marshallese islanders who claim to have seen a white woman and man being taken into custody. One even said he helped pull a silver plane from the lagoon. While none of these testimonies were ever officially confirmed, they share eerie consistencies across time and sources. In the 2010s, a piece of supposed photographic evidence surfaced in the U.S. National Archives, a grainy black and white image that appeared to show a woman resembling Earhart and a man thought to be Fred Noonan seated on a dock in Jaluit Harbor, under Japanese control. Behind them, a ship seemed to be towing an object vaguely resembling an aircraft. But this image sparked as much controversy as excitement. Historians debated its authenticity, and some questioned whether the photo had even been taken in the correct time period. If Earhart was indeed a captured spy, what became of her? That question gave birth to one of the most bizarre and enduring theories of all, that she survived and quietly returned to the United States under a new identity. This story took center stage in 1970 when author Joe Kloss released Amelia Earhart Lives, a sensational book claiming that Earhart assumed the name Irene Bolam, a banker from New Jersey with a murky past and an uncanny physical resemblance to the missing aviator. Supporters of the Bolam theory noted the suspicious lack of documentation about her early life before the 1940s. They also pointed out her involvement in women's organizations and social circles that mirrored Earhart's former interests. Comparative photo analyses even highlighted similar bone structures between the two women. Could Bolam truly have been Amelia in disguise? Bolam herself was livid. She flatly denied the claim, sued the publisher for defamation, and had the book pulled from circulation. Yet the controversy didn't end there. In the 1990s, journalist Randall Brink reignited the theory with supposed new documentation, again asserting that Bolam and Earhart were the same person. Around the same time, a retired psychologist, James Francis Kelly, claimed he had personally escorted Earhart back to the US on behalf of the church to protect her privacy. Despite Bolam's death in 2002, no DNA testing was ever conducted to put the matter to rest. Still, all these theories, whether built on classified missions or identity swaps, ran into the same unyielding wall, the missing airplane. No matter how compelling the evidence or persistent the speculation, without the wreckage of the Lockheed Electra, the mystery remained unsolved. Wreckage could end decades of debate. It could confirm, contradict, or completely redirect the narrative. But for generations, the Pacific offered no such closure. Dozens of expeditions, some funded by billionaires and backed by cutting-edge sonar, ended in disappointment. Until now. It took 88 years, and a leap in technology, to finally crack open the silence. The breakthrough didn't arrive through luck or a cryptic clue. It came through data. Mountains of it. In early 2025, a unique interdisciplinary team, comprising oceanographers, aviation historians, artificial intelligence engineers, and former military analysts, launched an entirely new kind of search. Instead of chasing theories, they consolidated everything ever known about Earhart's flight, her radio logs, navigation estimates, fuel records, personal notes, and even psychological patterns typical under stress. More than 10,000 historical documents, some long forgotten in dusty archives, were digitized and fed into a next-generation probabilistic algorithm originally developed for advanced search and rescue operations. This algorithm didn't guess, it calculated. It weighed dozens of variables at once: wind speed and direction on July 2, 1937, radio fade patterns affected by solar activity, how Fred Noonan might have recalculated their coordinates using celestial navigation with fuel dwindling, and how a seasoned pilot like Amelia would respond under pressure. Then, something extraordinary happened. The model delivered what no human had ever been able to: a precise location. It pointed directly to the Howland Basin, a deep underwater trench nearly 400 miles southeast of Howland Island. It wasn't a vague guess. It was a cold, data-backed conclusion. And for the first time in nearly a century, the mystery of Amelia Earhart's disappearance began to shift from speculation to solution. Here is your rewritten and restructured content, formed into compelling, emotionally resonant paragraphs while retaining all essential details. The discovery sent shockwaves through the global search community. For decades, this section of the ocean had been dismissed: too deep, too chaotic, too unreachable. Experts believed that if the wreckage had ended up here, it would have been irretrievably lost, swallowed by the crushing darkness of the Pacific. But suddenly, that long-dismissed possibility was no longer speculation, it was now the leading theory. Armed with fresh coordinates and a renewed sense of purpose, a new kind of expedition was launched. This time, there were no search planes circling overhead, no divers dropped into the surf. Instead, a fleet of cutting-edge underwater drones, autonomous and AI-guided, was deployed into the depths. Each drone was equipped with high-resolution sonar and advanced deep-sea scanners. They scoured the ocean floor tirelessly for over a week. On the 8th day, the ocean finally gave up its secret. A sonar image revealed a shape, twisted, broken, but unmistakably man-made. Wings. A fuselage. Landing gear. But it wasn't just the presence of the aircraft that struck the team, it was its positioning. The debris suggested not a crash, but an attempt to land. It looked as though Amelia had fought until the very end, trying to save herself and Fred Noonan. She hadn't given up. This discovery would have been impossible just 5 years earlier. The key to success was a fleet of groundbreaking underwater vehicles, 5 synchronized ADOE units, autonomous deep ocean explorers. These weren't tethered, remotely operated submersibles of the past. They were self-sufficient, capable of descending deeper, operating longer, and adapting intelligently to one of Earth's most hostile environments. Each drone could operate independently for up to 3 weeks, maneuvering through pitch-black waters without any need for surface contact. They scanned the seabed using next-generation synthetic aperture sonar, generating ultra-detailed 3D maps of the ocean floor. Unlike earlier grainy outlines, these images could identify objects as small as a coffee cup at depths exceeding 18,000 feet. What set this technology apart was its adaptability. The sonar systems recalibrated in real time based on changing water conditions, salinity, temperature, and density that had once distorted deep-sea imaging. Even objects buried under layers of silt became visible with unprecedented clarity. On board, the drones used AI algorithms originally designed to detect cancer cells. These systems could distinguish aircraft debris from rocks or coral with over 97% accuracy. When one of the drones detected something unusual, it didn't just mark the spot, it mapped the surrounding terrain, tracing how underwater currents might have dispersed the wreckage. Bit by bit, a story began to emerge: a starboard engine mount, twisted landing gear, fragments of radio equipment. This wasn't just a crash site, it was a chapter of history, preserved in the silence of the deep. The wreckage tells the truth. Once the sonar data was verified and the debris field confirmed, the mission shifted from detection to recovery. But this wasn't a salvage operation, it was a deep-sea archaeological dig. Every bolt, every broken panel, every artifact was treated as a precious piece of a long-lost story. The first major breakthrough was the discovery of a metallic structure buried under silt and coral. It was the starboard engine mount. Using delicate robotic arms, recovery crews lifted it from the seafloor. Once cleaned, the truth became clear: etched into the worn metal was a serial number, H1216. It matched exactly with the records of Amelia Earhart's custom Lockheed Electra 10E. This wasn't a similar model. This was her plane. But the wreckage told a deeper story. It wasn't scattered like the aftermath of a catastrophic crash. Just meters away, a section of the landing gear was found, bent, but mostly intact. Forensic analysis revealed compression patterns that indicated a slow, controlled descent. Amelia hadn't plummeted from the sky. She'd tried to land. The angle of the gear, the force of the impact, even the imprint in the sand all pointed to a single, profound conclusion: she was still fighting to survive. Then, something haunting surfaced. Between two pieces of twisted fuselage, a weathered leather jacket was discovered. It was stiff with salt and time, but unmistakable in detail. The stitching, the design, and the faint outline of the layee patch on the shoulder matched images of Amelia's final flight gear. It was hers. Nearby, a small metal compact case was uncovered, followed by a rusted toolkit with initials faintly visible on the handle, FN Fred Noonan. Inside were fragile, water-damaged pages. Despite their condition, parts of hand-drawn navigational changes were still legible. Even after losing contact, they had tried to adjust course. They had not given up. A fragment of their radio transmitter was also found, and it carried its own heartbreaking revelation. It had been tuned to the international distress frequency. The radio hadn't failed, they had called for help. The signals, tragically, were never heard clearly enough to make a difference. Scattered across the seafloor, an emergency survival kit lay open. Fishing line. A flare casing. Empty water purification tablets. Tools hastily pulled in desperation, in hope. The kind of hope that doesn't fade quickly, not even at the edge of the world. Amelia Earhart didn't just vanish. She survived. She adapted. She fought for life with quiet courage in the face of impossible odds. And now, 88 years later, her voice is finally being heard, not through headlines, but through the objects left behind. But one question still echoed through the deep: how long did they survive? What truly happened after they touched down in that vast, forgotten part of the ocean? The next discovery would bring the world closer to the most haunting answers of all: reconstructing her final hours. Here is your revised and rephrased version, turned into vivid, emotionally resonant paragraphs with a strong narrative arc. For the first time in nearly a century, researchers have been able to reconstruct the likely events of Amelia Earhart's final hours, not through guesswork or mythology, but through hard evidence. The breakthrough came from a combination of wreckage, digital analysis, and recovered artifacts that illuminated what truly happened on that fateful day, July 2, 1937. That morning, Amelia and her navigator, Fred Noonan, were nearing the final, and most perilous, leg of their journey, Howland Island. By 7:30 a.m., they were estimated to be within 200 miles of their target. But in the vast emptiness of the Pacific, the distance may as well have been 1,000. Finding Howland was like locating a single grain of sand on a beach. Then, the unexpected struck. An uncharted storm system swept across their flight path, blotting out the sky. Noonan's primary navigation tool, celestial positioning, became useless without stars to guide them. They were flying blind. Recovered fragments of Fred's charts revealed frantic adjustments, pencil marks, erased and redrawn lines. They were recalculating constantly, refusing to give in. They were still fighting to find that tiny island. At 8:43 a.m., Amelia sent her final confirmed radio transmission. We are on the line 157 to 337. We are running north and south. On the surface, those words seemed routine. But now, with the benefit of forensic data, we understand how much desperation they carried. Fuel analysis from the wreckage revealed the Electra had only 20 to 25 gallons left, enough for barely 30 more minutes in the air. Faced with that reality, Amelia made a bold decision. Rather than continue blindly toward Howland, the evidence suggests she altered course. Digital simulations, aligned with debris analysis and modified flight tools, indicate she turned southeast, toward the Gilbert Islands. She wasn't giving up. She was looking for any sliver of hope, land, survival, a chance. Even more striking was what the wreckage revealed. The positioning of the flaps, the throttle, and landing gear showed that this wasn't a violent crash. Amelia had executed a controlled water landing. The plane came in low, slow, and nose up, exactly as she had trained to do in case of emergency. She hadn't lost control, she had taken it. Then came the most haunting find, a corroded wristwatch confirmed to be Fred Noonan's. It had stopped at exactly 12:42 p.m., the same moment all other plane instruments froze. That was the instant when everything finally went still. But even after that, the story didn't end. The emergency kit had been opened. Items were clearly removed. A flare gun, fishing line, water tablets, the placement of each item told a desperate but determined story. Amelia and Fred had escaped the sinking plane and tried to survive, if only for a little longer. They held on to hope until the very end. Proof over theories. The discovery of Amelia Earhart's plane in early 2025 didn't just put a pin on a map, it rewrote history. It ended a mystery that had consumed imaginations for nearly 100 years and dismantled decades of speculation, myths, and conspiracy theories. For the first time, we had something undeniable, proof. And proof changes everything. One of the most persistent claims had long been that Amelia was captured by Japanese forces and held prisoner on Saipan or another outpost in the Marshall Islands. This theory thrived on wartime secrecy, scattered eyewitness accounts, and a famous grainy photograph. But the truth tells a different story. The wreckage of the Electra was found over 400 miles southeast of Howland Island, nowhere near Japanese territory in 1937. The crash site lies squarely in international waters. That photograph, once touted as the smoking gun showing Amelia and Fred in Japanese custody, was finally debunked. Experts reanalyzed it using photo metadata and archival sources. The verdict was clear, it was taken in Jaluit Atoll in 1935, 2 years before Earhart's final flight. The timeline simply didn't fit. Another long-standing theory, the Nikimerow or Ghana Island hypothesis, suggested Amelia crash-landed on that remote coral atoll and survived as a castaway. For years, artifacts like a jar, some bones, and scraps of metal seemed to support it. But modern DNA testing revealed that the bones belonged to a Polynesian male, not a Caucasian woman. And none of the Electra's serial-marked components were found near Nikimerow. All definitive wreckage was located in the Howland Basin. Even the more conservative crash and sink theory fell short. Yes, Amelia did land in the ocean, but not near Howland, and not in panic. She remained in control, flew farther than previously believed, and made a last, hopeful attempt to reach land. The evidence shows she stayed airborne long after losing radio contact, doing everything in her power to survive. As for the most bizarre theory, that she faked her death and lived the rest of her life as a New Jersey banker named Irene Bolam, it's now been laid to rest for good. DNA samples taken from Amelia's recovered flight jacket and compact case were matched to living descendants. The science is conclusive. She was never Irene Bolam. She was always Amelia Earhart. And perhaps the most heartbreaking detail of all, her radio transmitter was still operational. It had been tuned to the international distress frequency. She had been calling for help right up until the end. The signals simply weren't received clearly enough to make a difference. No spy mission. No secret prison. No double life. Just Amelia, an aviator, a pioneer, and a woman who, in her darkest hour, chose courage. She didn't surrender. She adapted. She fought back. And now, 88 years later, the world finally hears her story, not in speculation, but in truth. Certainly. Here's your rephrased and reorganized content into polished, well-structured paragraphs that flow smoothly like a professional documentary narration. Before she became a legend lost at sea, Amelia Earhart was already a sensation in the sky. To truly understand her legacy, we need to rewind to the moment she first tasted global fame and began her rise as one of the most iconic figures in aviation history. Amelia Earhart's journey to aviation greatness began in January 1921. Determined to take to the skies, she began flying lessons with Nita Snook, one of the first female pilots in the United States, at Kinner Field near Long Beach, California. To fund her passion, Amelia took on a variety of jobs: truck driving, photography, even working as a stenographer. Her perseverance paid off when she purchased her first plane, a bright yellow Kinner Airster she affectionately named the Canary. Just 2 years later, on May 15, 1923, she earned her pilot's license from the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, becoming only the 16th woman in the United States to achieve that milestone. In a male-dominated field, Amelia's determination stood out. Her ambition and charisma quickly caught public attention, and she began to make a name for herself in the aviation community. But it was in 1928 that her fame skyrocketed. Publisher and promoter George P. Putnam invited her to join a transatlantic flight, not as pilot, but as a passenger. The plane, a Fokker F.VIB 3M called Friendship, was piloted by Wilma Stultz and mechanic Louis Gordon. On June 17, 1928, the aircraft took off from Trepassey Harbor, Newfoundland, bound for Europe.